Welcome to the Lighting Mind Show, Episode 4. I'm your host, Sunil, and today I'm going to talk about the title of the podcast today is Jnana-Karma and the US China conflict. I'll promise you this is not an attention grabber title. There is a link between the Jnana-Karma concept and the US China current affairs news item that I'm going to talk about. The reason why I picked the topic is it is our way of looking at current affairs through our lens, through the Indic lens. And I want to connect the concept of this news item that I'm going to refer to the concept of the karma and jnana in the discussions in the Indic civilization. So let me share the news item with you and we can look at. So this is a New York Times article. It's from March 28th. And the title reads, the headline is From Rockets to Ball Bearings, Pentagon Struggles to Feed War Machine. Subheading, the flow of arms to Ukraine has exposed a worrisome lack of production capacity in the US that has its roots in the end of Cold War. So the gist of it, the short of it, and you can Google the title and you can look at the whole article, read the article or on the New York Times website or the archive website where the news item has been archived. The gist of this and the related article here, the empty bins in a wartime environment, the challenge to US defense industrial base. So the gist of this is over the last 20 to 25 years, US has outsourced production to China. And what it is finding out, so this news item is related to the US-China conflict simulation, because US runs war simulations to prepare its supply chains, to look at where the bottlenecks are so that they can fix the supply chain. And when they ran into different scenarios in a US-China conflict, always the bottleneck was the production of weaponry in the US completely depending on China. And if China stops the supply chain, all of the production of the weaponry in the US stops, comes to a standstill. And it's a very scary scenario. So, and the roots of all of this go back to 20 to 25 years. The whole concept of the flat world, the outsourcing, the thinking there goes back to the concept of jnana and karma. If you look at a value chain, the lowest in the totem pole of value chain is labor. Labor is the lowest. And as you add the component of knowledge to labor, the value chain increases. And at the highest value chain, it's the cream of the intellectual property, the highest knowledge in any field. It might be a weaponry design knowledge or anything that occupies the highest part of the totem pole, roughly coinciding with white-collared, ultra-white-collared jobs on the top and the blue-collar jobs in the bottom. So what has US done is the thinking is the US needs to be at the highest end of the value chain, producing only the cream part of the value chain, which is everything related to knowledge, jnana, and everything that is below that is messy. Its manufacturing is messy, labor is messy, so just outsource all the messy part outside so that, of course, there's a cost implication as well because of the cost, the lower cost outside. That is a very big motivator to send it out. But the biggest factor is not to deal with this mess, not to deal with labor. send it out, so that we only have the highest creamy layer of the value chain, and that is knowledge. So that is the thinking of how this outsourcing started. And of course, the the currency value and the exchange rates, of course, that is all there. But the biggest motivator is this part, that we want to grow in value to such an extent that we only occupy the highest value chain, which is the knowledge. Everything else can go outsourced. That's the flat world concept, is that. Now, when you do that, you come to these bottlenecks. And these bottlenecks highlight that you cannot be in an ivory tower sending everything out, because at some point of time, this will come back to bite you. And this concept is related to the Indian concept of Jnana-Karma or Jnana-Kanda, Karma-Kanda. Right? In the Jnana-Kanda, roughly the Upanishads or the Jnana-Kanda, the knowledge, the cream of knowledge of what in the Indic knowledge is in the Upanishads. And the Karma Kanda is all the karma, all the homas and all the other activities, all the labor, kind of labor activities. That is the Karma Kanda of it. And if you look at the Indic thought of the last 2000 years, the Indic thought is very similar to the thinking of outsourcing. And that is, if you look at the Indian schools of thought, many, like the popular schools of thought, knowledge is the highest, and the karma part or the labor part is lower. If you look at any of those, and some of the schools just treat karma as an illusion. You can see all these internet gurus when they're talking about all of this quantum mechanics and all of that, and connecting that to Vedanta. If you are a jnani, then you don't need any work. That's kind of like, if you look at this value chain concept in manufacturing, that is highest, that creamiest is a jnani. And if you are that, you don't have to deal with the mess. Where did that concept come from? And that is a very, very bad concept, that if you connect that to what is going on here in the US, the implications will be like this. And in India, the implications have been bad from that kind of thinking. You can tie that to the Bhagavad Gita as well. So if you look at the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 49, the shloka here, the Krishna says, Durena hyavaram karma buddhi yogat dhananjaya. He's saying, Dhananjaya, or Arjuna, karma is avara. Avara in Samskrita means inferior, lower, inferior to buddhi yoga. Buddhi yoga is nothing but jnana yoga. So what Krishna is saying here is jnana is high in the value chain, and karma or labor is lower in the value chain. Then he says, Buddhau sharanam anvichha. Seek refuge in knowledge. Karma is lower, is what it apparently seems to say. And that is what the interpretations of many popular schools of Vedanta in India for 2000 years has been this. And that is the reason why karma was seen as lower, something that needs to be get rid of, something that is illusion to that extent. But that is a very, very wrong way of looking at the relationship between knowledge and karma. And a practical example is this current affair news item of what US that did this thing by outsourcing the messy manufacturing part out is finding out today. If India had done this and Westerners were looking at India and commenting on what India was doing this, if India had outsourced to some other country all the messy labor, like as a hypothetical thing, they would have said, West would have said that this is a remnant of the Brahminical purity of knowledge, so that they have outsourced all the messy lower Varna jobs out. But thankfully, it's not India that is doing it. Of course, India doesn't need it, has too much of labor. But it's US doing it. So nobody's talking about this. And that's the reason why I wanted to look at this in through that lens. So going back to the article, going back to the shloka here in the Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna is saying karma is lower, what does he mean? Because he, in the fourth pada of the shloka, he says, Krupanaha alahetavaha. So he's not looking at karma in general. He's looking at a particular type of karma and saying that particular type of karma is lower. If you go in the future chapters, he says there are three kinds of karma: karma, vikarma, akarma. The vikarma is selfish, that which is done for selfish goals, short term. There is no investment in doing to attain knowledge. It's a short term gain, it's profits, things like that. That is what outsourcing is. So that is the vikarma. Akarma is basically not doing what ought to be done. Karma is what needs to be done. So when he says the karma is lower than knowledge, he is specifically referring to kamya karma. That means short-term gain karma. Short-term gain in terms of profits, in terms of all of these selfish goals. That karma, he says, is lower than knowledge, not every karma. Because in the next chapter, he goes on to tell Arjuna that knowledge and labor or action, they are tied together as a causal chain. It's the knowledge that leads to it. It's the work that leads to knowledge. This is common sense. That means if you need to learn, you need to work to learn, right? There are activities that you need to do to learn. You cannot consider that activity that leads to knowledge as inferior, because it's a cause to the effect, which is learning. So that cannot be outsourced. And that is exactly what, the ivory tower concept is. So you cannot sit in an ivory tower just thinking about concepts and everything else is outsourced. That cannot be done. That is very, very, very bad way of doing it, the consequences of which will be felt very soon, which US is seeing. So Krishna is very clear in the Bhagavad Gita that knowledge and the work activities that create knowledge, they are always together. There is no high and lower relationship between those two, because one leads to another. So there is no illusion, like gaining knowledge by reading books or doing activities by gaining experience, right? That's experiential knowledge. So the work that you do to gain that experience, that is not inferior. That's the mess that is required to learn. So the mess that is required to learn is part and parcel of what is called knowledge. So if you look at the value chain again, the cream is not an ivory tower. I will not touch anything lower. I will only think. That is a very, very dysfunctional concept. It is also in Indian schools dysfunctional. Whoever says Jnana-Kanda is the only thing, Karma-Kanda is lower or illusion, that is exactly what they are talking of. And that is very, very wrong. The concept is very wrong, because knowledge is not by itself. Knowledge is with the experience and the activities that lead to knowledge. They are connected at the hip. Both are very much needed. There is no one without the other. So whenever Krishna says that karma is inferior, he is referring to that as phala hetu. Phala hetu means where you are invested in a quick outcome, a quick gain. That kind of karma is lower, not every karma. So the Indic version of this outsourcing and the trouble that which US is in today is the use of this concept of removing the messy manufacturing, because it's lower value, it's labor, out, and not realizing that that labor is a very much needed thing with respect to the intellectual parts of the value chain. So labor and intellect goes together, because you cannot create without doing. As simple as that. That which you do to create is equal to knowledge, because it's part and parcel of knowledge. That which you just create to gain something, that is lower, that is not needed, or of course eventually not needed. So that is what an Indic take on the problem in current affairs that's going on today. Is the mess of labor is very much needed, because that is the one that creates knowledge. Knowledge creating labor cannot be outsourced. Let that be a lesson. I hope you have enjoyed this Indic take on the world affair. Please like and share the video if you like it, and comment if you want other topics. Until next time, until next podcast, bye.